Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, we continue today with Plant-Based Experts Down Under Week, and my guest is Dr. Renae Thomas. Please welcome her to the show. It's very nice to see you again.
Thank you so much. I am super excited to be here. I have honestly been listening to your content since before I was in medical school, and I definitely learned a lot more about nutrition from your interviews than I ever did in medical school. So thank you for all that you have taught me with these wonderful interviews.
Oh my God, that's such a wonderful compliment. Thank you. The last time I saw you was at the wonderful Fasting Escape. We had a lecture there from Dr. Doug Lyle and a wonderful dinner by Dr. Nate Gershfeld. So it's been a while since I've seen you, and I'm curious because I can detect a little bit of an Aussie accent, but from what I understand, you live in the United States. So what do you have to do with the Doctors for Nutrition and Plant-Based Experts Down Under?
Absolutely. So I did go to medical school in Australia. So I am technically an Australian trained doctor. And I got involved with Doctors for Nutrition when I was still in medical school, kind of learning the people, meeting the people involved. And then I was invited to be part of the panel as an international expert once I had come to the US. So I did kind of prepare a bit of a talk. I have some slides that really talk through how I ended up in the US, if that's helpful to share, and we can kind of go through my journey that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Let me share my slides. Give me one moment. Okay. How does that look on your end?
Good.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, I'm here, like I said, here with Doctors for Nutrition. I became one of their international advisors, and the topic they had recommended me to share on your show, kind of talking about my journey, and they said to title it Aussie Lifestyle Medicine Expert Calls the US Home. And so we'll kind of go about my journey into medicine, coming to the United States, and then the type of medicine that I practice. Here we go. So what brought me to the USA? Why am I here? I thought I would go back a little bit. My story starts around where that top photo is taken. It's my favorite picture of me with my father, who unfortunately was actually diagnosed with metastatic cancer before his 40th birthday. So quite young to have such an advanced cancer. And the kind of, in a way, blessing and a curse, a miracle, I believe at the time, was his doctor had told him that he should become fully vegetarian, or what we would now call vegan, or at the very least, he should cut red meat from his diet and really think about what he was doing if he wanted to see me graduate high school. And so my dad is a super avid reader, the most passionate reader I've ever met in my life. And he must have read every book on nutrition at that time. And a lot of our favorite names started to become commonplace in my household. People like Nathan Pritikin, Dr. John McDougall, Dr. Dean Ornish. And my dad did a lot of juice cleansing or juice fasting. He ate so many vegetables that he actually turned orange during his treatment. And me, I was a total daddy's girl, and I started to refuse to eat anything that my dad didn't eat. And so I became completely plant-based when I was about 4 years old. And at that age, I interpreted that if I ate that way, I would get cancer. And as we kind of know in the research, I wasn't entirely wrong. And so I've been entirely plant-based since before I was 5 years old. We followed pretty much a McDougall kind of starch-based diet, but probably interesting to you, AJ, I actually didn't have any sugar, any oil, or any salt. And that was how I thought was normal to eat for the majority of my life. And we also grew most of our fruits and vegetables at home as well. And we were completely organic. My dad actually is now a biodynamic avocado farmer, so very passionate about that kind of low chemical lifestyle and really taking care into what we put in our bodies. And so I thought that was totally normal. And that gave me a really healthy attitude to food, in my opinion. And I grew up thinking as well that that was what medicine was, right? You eat plant-based, you exercise, you don't smoke, you don't drink, you value your friends and family. And so I got very interested in nutrition at a young age because I saw my dad get well by changing the way that he ate. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to be a dietitian. And I applied for 3 years in a row. And in my final attempt, I was like, well, what am I going to do with my life? I thought, you know what, I'll just apply for medical school because I guess a doctor is kind of close enough. I can sort of talk to people about nutrition and get them well. And so I took my medical exam. And I somehow managed to pull a really high score, and I actually got guaranteed entry skipping the interview. And I think it was the interview I was failing for dietetics, I don't know. And so I ended up becoming a doctor. And honestly, it's so crazy because I love my job. I'm so passionate about it. And I literally couldn't imagine doing anything else, but it was never something I had seen myself doing prior to that kind of, oh, what else am I going to do with my life attempt. So I guess getting back, that was a very long answer, but getting back to why the United States. So I have always wanted to live in the United States ever since I was really young. It does sound really cliche, especially to people that are American, but it really felt like the land of opportunities for me. And I've always been a really big dreamer. I grew up in the suburbs of Perth, which is one of the smallest capitals in Australia, and I wasn't even close to the capital city. And I just felt a little restricted and isolated in what I could see myself doing and what I wanted to do with my life. I first came to California when I was 22, actually. I came for a fitness internship because I used to be a competitive bodybuilder, and I just fell in love with the United States and the people. And from that point forward, I was determined to find a way to move here. And so how that kind of started with medicine, when I was in medical school, I was one of the medical moderators with nutritionfacts.org and Dr. Greger. And I started to learn that there were plant-based conferences and that there were doctors that believed the same thing that I thought was medicine that I hadn't met prior to that point. And so I went to PBNHC, was actually the first conference I ever went to in the United States. And I actually met other Australians there. So I realized that people in my country were also doing it. And it was just absolutely life-changing. I got to hear people that I'd heard, such as on your podcast or webinars, and just got to see a lot of people that were kind of my idols at that time. And so at that conference, I also, for the first time, heard Dr. Alan Goldhammer talk. And in particular, what caught my attention was his hypertension study, where they have the consecutive normalization of blood pressures. And it was better results than I'd ever seen. At that time, I was rotating around hospitals in medical school. And, we're using 3 to 5 medications to lower blood pressures. And he was this person saying that you could just drink water and that would happen. And, at that time, like I said, I was totally cool with whole food, plant-based, SOS free. That to me was very normal, but water alone sounded really dangerous. And I was honestly pretty skeptical. And I emailed Dr. Goldhammer, and I basically was like, hi, I'm a skeptical medical student. Can I come to True North and do an internship? And he replied about 10 seconds later, as he typically does. And he was like, of course, come along, come learn about it. And I was really lucky because I got mentored and matched with Dr. Clapper to be my supervisor. And I ended up staying an extra week shadowing him after I had been at True North. And it was the greatest life-changing experience for me in my entire career to that point, because I realized that what I believed and what I wanted to do with my life was actually possible. And so much so, I actually begged Dr. Goldhammer to let me quit medical school and let me just stay there and keep working. But fortunately, he gave me good advice and advised that maybe I apply for residency in the United States. So residency being your post-medical school training where you kind of do your specialties. And he had told me about the program at Loma Linda University Health. And I was familiar with Loma Linda. I actually did my medical school research on the Adventist health studies, but I didn't know that they had a residency program. And so they have a program called Family and Preventive Medicine. It's a dual residency. You do family medicine, and then you're general preventive medicine and public health as a 4-year program. And so I called up the residency program director, and that day, and I went to visit a week later, and I actually had to cancel my Australian internship applications because they were on at the same time. So internship is what you would do after medical school in Australia. I canceled all my interviews and I flew to Loma Linda, hoping that I would somehow get a place. And somehow I actually managed to, and I ended up doing my residency at Loma Linda, and that was my first kind of entry to moving to the United States. And so Loma Linda is really, really fascinating of an area for those that aren't familiar with it. It's the only blue zone in the United States, which I'll kind of explain a bit more in a moment. And I just had so many amazing opportunities working there and really, really learned a lot. So kind of focusing down on why I wanted to go to Loma Linda, they're very famous for their Adventist health studies. So I thought we could touch on some of those findings and then some information about the blue zones to kind of put Loma Linda in context. And so the Adventist health studies are particularly significant or interesting. Loma Linda has one of the highest life expectancies in the world. The residents are 10 times more likely to live to 100 than your average American. And the average male in Loma Linda lives to about 89. The average woman lives to about 91, which is 10 years longer roughly than the national average. And the most important part, and what I got to see living there, is not only do they live longer, they live in good health well into their years. With modern medicine, we can really keep people alive for a long time, but these people were truly thriving into their 90s, into their early hundreds, and it was amazing to see. So based on the faith, in Loma Linda, mostly those following Seventh-day Adventists, most people actually don't smoke cigarettes, they don't drink alcohol, and they don't drink any caffeinated beverages. On average, they have pretty high levels of education, then kind of a strong spiritual family and friendship connections, and are generally more health conscious than the average person in general. But what makes it interesting is they actually have a variety of dietary choices. So about 50% of the population identifies as either vegetarian or completely vegan, making, if you can see, kind of a cohort study that minimizes a lot of the typical confounding factors that generally arise when you study diet and disease outcomes on a population level. So things like levels of education being one of them, health consciousness, cigarette smoking, and all of that's really controlled for in the Adventist health studies because it's the same amount on either side, they just vary by their diet. And so what's really interesting is it's not, plant-based eaters versus the standard American diet, which often comes up. It's plant-based eaters versus very health conscious omnivorous eaters. And it's important to note with this, to be classified as a meat eater in the Adventist health studies, you actually only had to eat one serving of meat once or twice a week. So it's significantly less than what most Americans are eating, and it makes the results even more striking. So what are some of the key findings? So going back to the longevity, Adventist males live about 7 years longer than the average American male, but they get an extra 2 years if they're vegetarian. Similarly, for females, they live about 4 years longer than the average female, and then they get an extra 2 years again if they follow a vegetarian diet. Some of the slides that I have here kind of summarize some of the most important findings, especially for clinical applications in medicine. And that's this real stepwise progression that we see in risk reduction for those, the more plant-based they become, having the lowest risk. And as they slowly increase the amount of animal foods that someone eats, you can see their risk goes up quite dramatically. So I have in the top corner, type 2 diabetes. And you can see that goes up quite a bit. And like I said, that big red bar, those non-vegetarians only had to eat meat once or twice a week. So they weren't eating it every day. It's quite low. And they eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, a lot of whole grains, a lot of legumes, in addition to that small portion of meat. And yet the results are still significantly improved for those that are completely plant-based. You can see the same pattern again for hypertension and the same pattern for heart disease. So these are really, our biggest chronic diseases in the United States, showing pretty dramatic differences just based upon the foods that one is consuming. Body weight is also significantly lower in the plant-based eaters, and the vegan group in the Adventist health studies are still the only group to fall within a healthy BMI range. And the average vegan Adventist woman weighs about 40 pounds less than the non-vegetarian Adventist female. So even this super health conscious, Adventist female is still weighing 40 pounds more if she chooses to include those small portions of animal products in her diet. I don't know the statistic for men because it's always women that ask me about their weight. So blue zones wise, for those unfamiliar with the term blue zone, it refers to areas in the world where there are the most centenarians, or those living into their hundreds, and preferably, like the Adventist health studies, living well into their hundreds. And so the most popular book is by Dan Buettner, kind of summarizing key practices that can be attributed not only to the increased life expectancy, but that increasing quality years of life. And so Loma Linda residents, as I said, have a life expectancy of about 10 years longer than the average US citizen. Some of the key findings in Loma Linda in particular include that plant-based diet and lots of regular intakes, whole grains, legumes, some nuts. That's mostly coming up because they have a lot of studies into walnuts in Loma Linda, and then a lot of soy foods. And even among those in Loma Linda that don't consume an entirely plant-based diet, the bulk of the nutrition is still fruits and vegetables. And they often eat a lot more meat alternatives like legumes more than actual meat as well. So kind of an interesting comparison while I was at Loma Linda University Health. I had this really interesting contrast as the primary care clinic that I worked at actually wasn't in Loma Linda. It was run by Loma Linda doctors, but it was actually located in San Bernardino, which is funnily enough the home of McDonald's. And unfortunately, it's also one of the poorest and most violent cities in the United States. And so I had this opportunity. I could compare, when I was working at the hospital, I might see a typical Loma Linda patient. Maybe one that comes to mind is, say, a 91-year-old female. She was fit, she was healthy. I remember she was doing water aerobics every day at the local gym. And she came in for an annual exam and she had no medications, no health problems. And I said, have you ever been in hospital? Have you ever seen a doctor? And she was like, oh yeah, when I was 21, I had a baby in the hospital. And that was about her only medical history. She was super healthy and well. And that kind of person was not a standout for Loma Linda. I saw a lot of people that were a lot older than I would have expected in really good health, chronological ages closer to 60 or so when they're more like 90. It was really impressive. In contrast, in the San Bernardino clinic, it was really sad. I saw some of the most unwell people I had ever seen, especially coming from training in Australia, because it's a little bit next level in the United States. We're probably about 10 years behind the same trajectory, unfortunately. But I was seeing children with high blood pressure, children with type 2 diabetes, children with cholesterol in the 300s. The typical adult I would see would have high blood pressure. They would have either pre-diabetes or diabetes. They would have high cholesterol. And then, one or more of the following, kind of pick your story, but, joint pain, thyroid problems, autoimmune diseases, mental health struggles, asthma, skin problems, cardiovascular disease in their 30s and their 40s. I saw 40-year-olds having really significant strokes, digestive disorders, name any one you'd like. Unfortunately, substance abuse, so cigarette smoking, alcohol, and drug use. And it was just such a different population. And when I did a research project there, and the average BMI of the clinic at that time was actually 42, and that's including children that were going to the clinic. And it was just crossing the train tracks. I mean, I had less than 10-minute drive from my house when I was living in Loma Linda to get there. And just crossing that train tracks had a completely different patient population. So for me, I found that really inspiring, as that inequality, it didn't seem fair. It didn't seem right. And I really wanted to help address that difference that I was seeing. It just didn't make sense to me. And what was really one of my favorite parts of working there was to see that my patients could prove over and over again that regardless of their zip code, their genetics, their poverty levels, unemployment rates, their level of education, their social situation, diseases don't really discriminate. And in a way, you can think of that positively, because many of the diseases I was seeing, we could prevent them, we could improve them, and often even reverse them by moving towards a plant-based diet. And more importantly, was to show that it could be done both cheaply, easily, and accessibly and sustainably. And so really one of my passion projects was I worked with WIC, Women, Infant, and Children, the subsidy program nationwide. And I worked with the San Bernardino County to create a plant-based nutrition guide. We based it on $3 to $4 per day cost-wise, which was even further reduced if they were WIC eligible. And we started using it in the clinic. Lots of other doctors got it. It was really popular. It was really fun to see it work. And then a lot of the WICs nationwide actually adopted it on and started using it as well. I actually got to publish a very similar guide with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and really just to address that barrier that people believe that eating healthy is expensive. We really took it down to the basics to get well without, going broke. And so I just saw so many wonderful health improvements when we were using lifestyle-based care like this. Type 2 diabetes on insulin reversing. I can't tell you as a doctor how amazing that feeling is to take someone off insulin. It's life-changing for them, of course. Weight loss, autoimmune diseases improving, fertility improving, asthma improving, skin changes getting better, headaches resolving, reflux disappearing, improved mood, and just so much more. And I'm not trying to say that it's the magic bullet, but the level of health improvement was just amazing to see in that area. So I'll be totally honest, when this topic was suggested, I was like, I don't really feel that comfortable talking about myself and, things I have achieved. It feels like kind of bragging, and I don't know, I'm more of a modest person, but I wanted to bring up some things and some of the opportunities that I had, rather not so much focusing on me, but more just to show exciting things happening in medicine with regards to kind of whole food, plant-based nutrition really growing in the field. And so a couple of things I wanted to highlight. One of the coolest ones I did, and I really hope this starts to spread nationally and internationally, but at Loma Linda University Health, we have lifestyle medicine inpatient and outpatient consultations. And so dedicated time, usually up to an hour, to go and visit and really talk about whole food plant-based nutrition and prescribe it for particular health problems. And doing it in an inpatient setting, we often did it in the stroke ward. And so it's at a time where a lot of people are really questioning their health, and to come in with something really useful and practical and, to be honest, not that challenging, was really, really kind of the perfect time to come in. And I thought that was an amazing program that they had started there. Along similar lines, they have the 2-year lifestyle medicine residency curriculum, and that is a combined project starting off at Loma Linda University again, and then with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and it's been spreading nationwide, getting more and more popular every year, and it teaches the principles of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine to doctors in training, so those doing their specialty programs over 2 years. And there's at least 30 hours of specifically whole food plant-based nutrition, teaching it to doctors on how to help their patients. So seeing that go, if that was in every residency program, it would be a completely different field of doctors in the world. A couple of other ones. One of my really good friends in residency and we researched teaching whole food plant-based nutrition, that's a mouthful, to medical students, and how that would then influence their personal and their professional behaviors, which obviously was very enjoyable. We got to present our findings at a lot of conferences, but really seeing that a lot of it, it's not doctors' attitudes or how they feel about nutrition. A lot of it is a lack of knowledge, and giving a really solid foundation course, it not only changed the way they interacted with their patients, they were counseling about nutrition more and felt really confident in what to say, but they also changed their personal behaviors. They were eating more fruits and vegetables, they were eating less meat. And again, we were with an Adventist crowd where I think in our study, 60% were already vegetarian. So really different population, again, to the majority of the United States, but also improving even further after that educational course. It was really fun to do that. Similarly with young doctors is absolutely just the growing field of those interested in whole food plant-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine. I was on the trainee board with American College of Lifestyle Medicine for 4 years. The last 2 years I have been president, and I just wish I knew all these people when I was in medical school. I could have had some friends that believed the same things as me. But again, it's just amazing to see this movement just growing. I didn't meet another person that was plant-based until I was in my 20s. And now, I know hundreds, and a lot of them in the medical field or health professionals field, teaching this to patients and helping them get well. So, lifestyle medicine with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine is the fastest growing specialty in the United States. And it makes me really excited to see that. And kind of finally, I actually got to do a month of research with the Adventist Health Study lead author, Dr. Michael Orlich, and that was such an incredible experience for me. We published a book chapter on the risk of cancer in vegetarians. It was in a textbook. It's Vegetarian Nutrition and Wellness, which is kind of core curriculum for a lot of universities on nutrition. And I guess it was really special for me, as it felt like my story with my dad had really made full circle. So why am I still here? So after 5 years at Loma Linda University Health, I have moved to a new position, and I'm really excited to say I am officially the medical director at Fasting Escape with Dr. Nathan Gershfeld. So seeing patients who wish to fast, but maybe might be on medications or might need a medical screening or medical evaluation before that would be safe to do so. And then even for those not interested in fasting, but seeking a doctor, that understands their plant-based lifestyle or wants a more lifestyle-focused physician, I do primary care and wellness visits, mostly via telemedicine. So anywhere you are in the country is completely fine.
And I do have to thank you, AJ, because I don't know if you know this, but Dr. Gershfeld and I met because I heard him on your show, and I basically cold emailed him and said that I had moved to Loma Linda and that I had also been to True North and I wanted to meet him, and we kind of became friends and continued on a kind of a professional relationship ever since. And now we're working together. So pretty exciting. Thank you for that connection.
Well, I've hooked up a lot of people in the plant-based world.
I bet. So I don't know how much more you want me to talk. I put together a couple of case studies just because I tend to talk really fast, especially when I'm nervous, and I didn't know if it would be enough to share, or you'd rather just go on to you and your questions.
Well, I'd love to hear some of your case studies, and then I do have a few questions for you as well.
Okay, we can do both. Absolutely. So I just wanted to talk about two patients that I had. Obviously, they gave me their permission to talk about them, but then we de-identified to a degree. But these are two of kind of my favorites. And these were both in the clinic that I had mentioned, the one in San Bernardino. So lots of things up against them, and still just amazing stories. So Mr. B, 64-year-old male, he was uninsured and definitely below the poverty line in income. And I met him when he was actually hospitalized. When I was at Loma Linda, I worked both inpatient and outpatient. So I was one of the senior residents, kind of leading a team of doctors when he was hospitalized. And he came in as kind of consequences of uncontrolled diabetes. He was one of those people that hadn't seen a doctor in like 20 years. And so for those familiar with numbers for diabetes, once you're hitting an A1C of about 6.4, you are diabetic, and uncontrolled is over 7 and over 10 is really bad. And he came in with an A1C of almost 17. And in the hospital to control it, we had him on almost 40 units of insulin, long acting, and then mealtime insulin as well, which is a lot of insulin to be using for someone, especially when they hadn't been on insulin before. He also had really uncontrolled blood pressure. It was 220 over 110 when he came in. And then he had a lot of complications of that. So he had diabetic retinopathy, so impaired eyesight from diabetes. He had peripheral neuropathy from diabetes, so lots of numbness and tingling. He couldn't feel his feet at all, up to about mid-shin. And then he had, because of that, it's very easy to get injuries, because you can imagine if you can't feel your foot, it's very easy to injure it and not know. And so his actual hospitalization reason was for osteomyelitis, or bone infection. And it was just from knocking his foot and not noticing. And so we got him kind of stabilized in the hospital setting, but he also had one of the inpatient lifestyle medicine visits while he was there. And he pulls me aside one day, he like grabs me and he's like, is this stuff true? This lifestyle medicine nonsense, like, is this actually true? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. You can get well. And he was like, why haven't I heard about this? I'm like, well, it's new, it's coming, but it's really sad. And so he was a very dedicated individual, and he went completely whole food plant-based that day. I was always having to cook. So at the hospital, I should have said this before, but Loma Linda University Hospital is completely vegetarian. And then East Campus, where I used to work, actually has a completely vegan menu. And so you can order whole food plant-based food while you're in the hospital. And so he did it that day, went completely whole food plant-based. We put him on the whole food plant-based menu. And so he started his journey there. I followed up with him in clinic pretty regularly afterwards. And at about the 6-month mark, his A1C was below 7. And so we could take him off insulin at that time, which was very, very, very happy days for him. And he actually regained all sensation in his feet. So we do a foot exam for diabetes. You use a monofilament, or it's kind of like a very skinny straw, to poke the foot, and that's how we know how you can feel. And his had completely resolved. He had full sensation. And this was someone that came into the hospital because they had injured their foot so badly because they couldn't feel it, and can now feel this little tiny plastic straw. So really cool to see that improvement. He had actually been legally blind. I hadn't really been aware of it because he compensated really well for it in the hospital. And then when I saw him in the clinic, he said to me, you don't sound blonde. And I was like, what on earth are you talking about? And he said, well, I'll be honest with you, I haven't been able to see you for the last 6 months because my eyesight's been so bad. And he said, but it's improved. I can see what color your hair is. And I was like, this is crazy, like incredible results. He had actually left the hospital against medical advice as a side note because they wanted to amputate his foot. And so he successfully avoided his amputation and got his sensation back by improving his lifestyle. And I guess kind of important when I talk about the financial part, he was using food stamps at the farmer's market, and he was buying bulk dried beans and big bags of rice. And that was pretty much what he was living off. And to be able to have those health improvements was just phenomenal. And he had said to me, he's like, I wish I knew this earlier before he got so sick. But so cool that even with that kind of severity of disease that had developed, the health journey he went on was really inspiring.
I never knew that you could sound like a certain hair color.
I know. I was like, what does that even mean? He just started laughing, and I was like, okay, whatever. I don't know what that means. I don't know if I want to know, but yeah. Anyway, so the other one that I really wanted to share, again, funnily enough, also Mrs. B, but no relation to him at all. She was 48, and I started taking care of her as an outpatient. She was a follow-up from the hospital. And one of the biggest strokes I have ever seen, especially in someone so young. And so she had come in, she had complete hemiplegia. So one side of the body completely not respond, like couldn't move any of it, basically. She also had what's called, now I need to see if I can pronounce this properly, Homonymous Hemianopia, which is you lose one side of your visual field, but in both eyes. So like you can't see the left on one or you can't see the right on both eyes. And so she had that as well. And unfortunately, that means that you're no longer allowed to drive a car. So you lose your independence with that. She also had really strong slur or dysarthria, very, very hard to get words out and enunciate. She had left-sided neglect, which is where your body kind of forgets there's a left side of your body. So if you say look left, they just can't. If you say move your left hand, like they have no consciousness that they have a left hand. It's really crazy to see. She had really bad neuropathic pain or nerve pain, which comes often with a lot of type of strokes. And being a 48-year-old woman with her entire life changing, also really severe depression came with that. And so we talked about transitioning, and she was very motivated. Basically one of those people that's like, doctor, what can I do? I'll do anything. I want my life back. And so she went on a very strict whole food plant-based diet as well. We had to clean up some of her lifestyle behaviors like alcohol and things like that and cigarette smoking. But she was, like I said, super motivated, did all of that. And then I saw her 6 months later. I've been seeing her regularly. I saw her actually almost every 2 weeks, but about the 6-month mark. And she was very proud of her improvement. So she would always be like, look what I could do when she'd come in. And by that point, she could look left. So that neglect was improving a lot. And she actually was able to kick me with her left leg. She was very proud of that, able to speak clearly at that point, and was able to actually wane off all her pain medications and nerve medications. And she really started to feel like there was hope and that her life was worth living again. By the 12-month mark, she actually was able to walk her daughter down the aisle, which I would not have thought she was able to walk again. And just her determination to improving her health allowed her to be able to do that. And her vision actually improved at that point too, that she was able to get her license back and get her independence back. And similarly, to the other patient, living below the poverty line, I think she told me her food budget was about $20 a week. She was living off frozen fruits and vegetables from the dollar store. And she was just like, I'll literally do anything. She was a big burrito person. She's like, I'll give up my Taco Bell as long as I can walk again. And she was able to do that. So it was really, really inspiring story to see her get well. And when I had thought about this, I've seen her again after, and she just keeps getting better and better. She's such a miracle story. And I guess just to put it into context, some of the things that, really do improve with lifestyle, I touched on some before, but wanted to kind of list some of them because sometimes it's hard to think. A lot of people are like, well, will it work for me? And it's always hard to say, but it's definitely worth a try. Things like infertility. I saw a lot of people get pregnant, which was really fun. In family medicine, you can do prenatal care and deliver babies. So delivering a baby of someone that I had been seeing for years with infertility is a really special moment. Treating extra weight and obesity, acne, things like PCOS, interstitial cystitis, migraines, recurrent UTIs, asthma, allergies, rheumatoid arthritis, a lot of reversals there, really cool. Improving things like lupus, autoimmune diseases. The gastrointestinal things are kind of a given, reflux, IBS, IBD, Crohn's, colitis, a lot of improvement for a lot of people with those. High cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, even improving type 1 diabetes, lots of mood things, anxiety, depression, getting better, a lot of the thyroid problems, lots of infections, yeast infections, bacterial vaginosis,
more autoimmune, psoriasis, even epilepsy sometimes improving, fibroids, period pain, gout, sickle cell disease pain improving, hemorrhoids, menopausal symptoms, strokes, TIA, low energy, sleep apnea, rosacea, and chronic kind of allergies and rashes. And that was just a list I took. I looked through some of my patients that I had seen over the last 5 years. And so that was some of the things that we saw get better. So hope that's kind of helpful to share. And that's, I guess my big thank you so much for having me.
Wow, that is very inspiring. And how is your dad doing?
Oh, he's great. He's, I think he's 68 this year. He's wonderful. For context, his type of cancer was not considered curable, and he is completely cured. So he had metastatic cancer. He had mets in his lungs, in his liver, and in his bones, and not considered curable. But he did do everything. He did do chemotherapy and surgery, but it was not supposed to be curative. He got his cancer free at 7 years out. And yeah, it's like, so he would have been 45 when he was cancer free, and now he's 68. He's on no medications. He has no health problems. He weighs less than when he got married, and he lives in the middle of nowhere on a farm. He's sustainable off his own land, farming his avocados.
Did they consider him a medical miracle?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Does he eat the same way that you recommend to your patients?
Yeah, my dad is probably even more strict. My dad mostly eats fruits and vegetables that he grows himself in his garden. So biodynamic is next level for organic. So if you imagine organic, no pesticides, no herbicides, nothing like that. And then they also plant their plants with the phases of the moon to take it to biodynamic, and they use special fertilizers and things like that. So he's very, very into health for that. So he mostly eats fruits and vegetables, and then he eats some kind of brown rice sometimes, and not a lot else, to be honest with you.
Where did you grow up?
In Perth, in Western Australia. So I lived in Western Australia in Perth until I was 17, and then I moved to the East Coast, and I lived in Melbourne, and I went to university in Melbourne.
When did you first hear about a plant-based diet?
That would have definitely been from my dad. So 4 years old would be when I first started doing it. And so I don't have a great memory of it. I remember my dad juicing like a crazy person. I remember my dad turning orange because he drank so much carrot juice. And then I remember the meals that we started eating, and it was a lot of just like vegetable soup. Because my dad, back in those days, at least in Australia, because he did have chemotherapy, it's very nauseating and it makes you like vomit a lot. And so we mostly just ate soups and really bland things. And so I remember that. And then from what my parents had told me, once my dad started doing it, I just refused to eat anything else. And so that was when I first heard about it. And then growing up, because I had to be able to, be social and eat in the world, my dad taught me a lot about it, and not just the health aspects, but also kind of the ethical aspect of a plant-based diet as well, and the environmental impacts. And so I would say I was very confident in talking about what I ate, like why and why not, from probably 6 or 7 years old. And I really like my dad did it in a way that he kind of taught me to be very respectful. I know that it's very easy to fall in the passionate vegan, and I think we've all done that at some point, but very much, I would say almost similar. My dad has a similar approach to what I've heard from Dr. Doug Lisle, in just that it works for me and kind of no other questions asked. And that was kind of how I taught, like, would you like this? Like, no, thank you, not for me. And, why do you eat that way? Oh, it works for me. Like, I feel good. And I think that, I talked to my parents about it, and, I said, what were people saying to you? Like, did they think you were abusing your child? And, when I was in all through elementary school, I was a really high level gymnast, and my parents would just say, well, she's clearly thriving, like no problem. She's, one of the best gymnasts in the state. Like there's clearly no problem with her diet. I was a really good student. I was really good athletically, not to be up myself, but I was doing just fine. And so I think they found it very easy to be like, well, it seems to be working for her. So we carried on. But in terms of it being an official thing, I started getting really interested in nutrition before I started high school and started reading a lot of books. Like I said, Nathan Pritikin's book was one of the first books I ever read. And so really learning about those definitions of this is a plant-based diet, this is what we're doing for health, and getting involved in it that way. But I didn't meet anyone else that ate that way until I think I was in my mid-20s. So it was very, very different for a while.
Wow. Well, how did your dad hear about it though?
Yeah, so my dad told me that his doctor had told him, kind of in a bit of a weird way. I remember him saying something along the lines of, well, if you want to see your daughter graduate high school, you should go on a plant-based diet. And my dad was like, what's a plant-based diet? And so he explained to him, at least stop eating red meat. And then he had recommended that my dad do some research on it. And my dad would read all day long if he was allowed to. And so he just went to the library and read everything on nutrition. And he stumbled across a lot of the names that we know. So I know we had Nathan Pritikin's book. We had a lot of books by Dr. John McDougall. We had some books by Dean Ornish, and just reading about cancer and nutrition. And he felt like, and the Adventist health studies, obviously. And that's why it's a big part of my journey, because my dad read the Adventist health studies are actually predominantly on cancer. A lot of people don't know that, but it's really looking at nutrition and cancer. And seeing that evidence was enough for my dad to completely change his lifestyle.
That's, he sounds like an interesting guy. I'd love to interview him.
Oh yeah, he would totally do it. He talks like more than me. But yeah, he would love it. He's definitely super interested. Very, very, very humble, very modest guy. Like he would be, like I said, he's very much like, oh, it works for me, like very hands off. But no, that would be awesome. He's cool.
What did his doctors think of his recovery?
Yeah, so I know he had told, so it was actually his primary care doctor that told him to go on a plant-based diet. And he said his oncologist thought he was crazy. But so he said that he kind of had the same approach with his doctor. He just stopped really telling them. And he was like, well, it seems to work for me. But it was interesting because when I talked to my dad, he said that they would often comment like how well he was doing. And I remember a couple of things he told me, like one of them was how well he was tolerating the chemo. He was a lot less sick than other people. And he attributes it to his diet. And they would say things like, wow, you're doing really well. Like, why do you not have pain? Why are you not so sick? And he would just be like, I don't know. But like deep down, like he knew what it was. But he back then, he said that they thought he was crazy. He was going to lose too much weight. He was going to get sick. How do you live without meat? And so he said he just stopped talking to them about it because he knew it was working for him. He felt great. And so he just kind of carried on his own journey.
Are any of his doctors still alive?
I know the primary care doctor is, but the primary care doctor is also plant-based. That's why he had recommended it. So I know the primary care doctor is still alive. I don't know about the oncologist. I would guess probably not because he was quite old at the time.
Wow. Well, I'd like to know that primary doctor. I'd love to have him on the show too. I think it's so fascinating that there have always been people like this, even if we don't know who they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm so grateful. It for me, I feel so lucky because I was so young. I have like no memory of ever eating animal products. And I've been able to live such a healthy and happy life. And I really do attribute it for that. So I'm super grateful because it meant that my life was completely different to what it may have been. It's so sad and scary for a lot of people to have a cancer diagnosis, especially your dad. But for me, it changed my entire life. I'm almost in a way grateful for it, but that's a really weird thing to say for cancer, but you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, well, it looks like it worked for you too.
Yeah.
But the SOS free part now, people have heard of a vegan diet and a plant-based diet, but SOS free, most people think that's too extreme. How did your dad know not to include those things?
Absolutely. So I think the sugar was quite an easy one in terms of refined sugars. There's definitely, even back then, studies on, I don't want to say cancer feeds on sugar because it's not really a correct statement, but definitely some correlation between high sugar diets, but like refined sugar. We're not talking fruit or anything like that, but refined sugar diets and cancer. I think that link has been known for some time, especially someone that has active cancer, like you're throwing fuel on the fire, right? So I think that one was pretty obvious. The fat one came mostly from Dr. John McDougall and Nathan Pritikin because their diets were low fat and oil free. So really, that was more the cardiovascular disease. But my dad was, the common logic being, well, if I have cancer, the last thing I need is cardiovascular disease too. And so that's where kind of the no oil part came in. And I'll be totally honest with you, my mom has, she's very much wanting to be slim, and we knew that oil is quite fattening. So that was another reason that we were oil-free, I believe, and sugar-free probably. And then salt-wise, my dad has always been low salt. So even my dad's parents are very healthy. They were both professional tennis players. And so they have always been very much kind of ahead of their time. So even my dad's dad is actually a World War II veteran, and at that time advocated to not smoke because he noticed it affected him when he played tennis. And that was when they gave veterans free cigarettes. And so he was telling everyone, don't smoke, it's bad for your health. And, everyone thought he was crazy. And his parents always ate fruit for breakfast and fruit for lunch, fruit and salad for lunch, and then only had one cooked meal, and they didn't have salt. And so my dad grew up like knowing that, you only used salt as needed for exercise. And so I think that kind of trickled down from there too.
Are your grandparents still alive?
Unfortunately, they are not, but my grandfather only just passed away at 99 and a half. So he nearly made it to 100. And then his wife, unfortunately, was a cigarette smoker when she was very young, and she had really bad emphysema, and she ended up passing away from COPD. It was really sad and awful. But other than that, she was completely healthy as well. And she lived into her like mid or late 80s. So she still had a pretty good life. But yeah, my dad's dad lived to almost 100. He played tennis competitively internationally until he was 96 years old. So he was on the Australian team of oldies. And so, yeah, really good example of longevity.
That's incredible. I talk to so many people who say it's just too hard to feed kids healthy and to put them on a plant-based diet, and they don't want them to grow up different or weird or miss out on parties. But I don't think what they see is the result. Like somebody like you who is free of disease, who looks great, who feels great. They don't see the future, what is possible.
Absolutely. And I spend so much time, especially when I was working in primary care, seeing these children, and they're so sick, and, the parents are so scared that they're not going to eat. And I'm like, children will eat when they're hungry. And the example you lead at home is how your children will end up living. And I think that it's so sad focus on 2 minutes of pleasure in the mouth versus a lifetime of good health. Like, they're not even comparable. And what's crazy, and I still don't know really the logic behind this, but I actually AJ, my parents never told me what I could and couldn't eat. They actually told me I could eat whatever I wanted to, whenever I wanted to. And we actually did have things like chocolate sometimes in the house, but I never wanted it because it made me feel sick, and it just didn't make me feel any good. And if I went to parties, they would tell me you can eat whatever you want, and I know I would go to parties and I would eat all the carrot sticks. And so I don't know if that comes from me being so young that maybe I know that my palate is completely different to other people. Like, I could not eat fast food or something. It would just be awful to me. But I think you're totally right in that, start your kids young, but you can also change. And I think that, I've seen a lot of kids that are like 10 or 11 or 12. And when I talk to them about good nutrition, the kids are really motivated. It's the parents that are scared. And it's a lot of education and kind of teaching them how to improve their kids' health. But you absolutely nailed it. I mean, it's very hard for me to understand how, some kind of taste pleasure outweighs a super healthy life. It really does. And I know that for people that have done it for years and years, change is really hard. And I totally get that. And I'm all for transitioning in whatever way works for the individual. But it is an interesting argument, like you say, like which wins out, food or your life.
Yeah. I hear that sports have always been a big part of your life. Tell me about it.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that comes from my family. So like I said, both my dad's parents were professional tennis players, and so was his brother. And then my dad was always super active as well. I think the equivalent in America is like Division I swimming, Division I hockey, like very, very active. And so my family was just always active. I've always been, every single day of my life that I lived at home, we would go out walking. But I've always played sports. I started off playing baseball of all things, and then I did a lot of gymnastics. I've just been super active. When I finished doing gymnastics, I needed to find something else to kind of channel my passions towards. And I got very interested. So I was always quite skinny when I was younger, not unhealthily so, but a little on the skinny side. And then once everyone went through puberty, I did feel a little self-conscious. I felt a little prepubescent looking. And so I kind of wanted to gain a little bit of weight, but I wanted to do it healthily. And so I got really into weightlifting to try and build some muscle. And I got very into it, and I actually started competing in bodybuilding. And part of my motivation being, this is an industry that's very dominated by high protein, high animal diets, and kind of this notion that you can't do it otherwise. And so I was kind of motivated to prove a point. And it took me a long time. It took me about 7 or 8 years, but I eventually ended up winning the Australian title, and I went to the Arnold's, which was really cool. I didn't win at the Arnold's, so when I got there, I decided that if I won my pro card, I would leave medical school. So I didn't enjoy medical school. You're probably getting that vibe because I keep mentioning it. But I was going to leave medical school, and I ended up not getting my pro card. And so I stayed in medical school, but it got pretty high up in the sport. One of my favorites being one of the national shows. I had won the bikini division, and my friend who's vegan, Simone Collins, actually won the figure division. And so the two vegans took out the show, and it was pretty funny in that industry. So that was a lot of my motivation to do it. I had a really good time doing so.
That's cool. Can we see video or pictures of that anywhere?
I mean, probably. I can send you one, maybe.
You should be proud of that. That's incredible. I hear that teaching medical students about whole food, plant-based nutrition is a passion of yours.
Absolutely. So one thing I love, both my parents were actually teachers. So my dad's retired, but my mom's still teaching. And I loved teaching. I grew up in that environment. And it became particularly apparent to me when I started residency. So as you go through, residency is very fast paced, and you very quickly go from student to teacher really fast. And I started to I've been so into lifestyle medicine. It's been my focus, my passion. And I started to become known, I guess, in residency for that. And people would always ask me questions. And so I want to see that movement grow. I mean, that's one of my biggest passions, is seeing doctors not necessarily specialize in lifestyle medicine, but recognize it as an evidence-based, legitimate field of medicine has been really important to me. And so I thought, well, who better to educate the next generation? Like some of my peers, their residency is really busy. You're working 80 hours plus per week. They don't really have time to study more, but medical students are like sponges. They want to learn everything. And so got really interested in kind of talking to them about, do you talk to your patients about nutrition? Are your patients exercising? And a lot of them would say, I want to, I understand the benefits, but I don't know what to say or what to do or what diseases need what. And so that was my research project that I had mentioned. Was we looked into teaching whole food plant-based curriculum to medical students, and so ended up doing the statistical analysis and reviews and all the complicated stuff that goes through the research to really see if it made any difference. And so the key points that we had studied was, does it change their professional behaviors? So does it change their confidence in counseling patients about whole food plant-based nutrition? Do they do it more often? And do they feel like it makes a difference? And all of those improved significantly with the curriculum. And then we also wanted to see if it changed their personal behaviors. Does it make, because one of the biggest factors for a doctor talking to patients about nutrition is actually a doctor that follows a plant-based nutrition or has a strong interest in nutrition. Same with exercise. Doctors that exercise talk to their patients about the benefits of exercise. And so we wanted to know if the curriculum helped them eat better themselves, not just for their own health, but also then they would be more likely to talk about it to their patients. And we saw significant improvements there. The cohort at Loma Linda was a little bit interesting because over 50% were already vegetarian. So some of our results on, say, eating less meat, they were statistically significant, but not ginormously. But eating more fruits, eating more vegetables, eating more whole grains, and eating more legumes went up dramatically through the course of the program. And just their overall scores of health, a lot of the things we looked at, do you feel healthier? Do you think your nutrition is healthy? How's your energy? A lot of those scores got a lot better as they went through the curriculum as well, which was really cool to see.
Nice. I hear you have a publication pending. Can you tell us about it?
So that is it. That is the one. I just need to get myself on it and get it published. So I think I got a bit lazy because I presented it at maybe 4 or 5 conferences and I got a little over it. I needed to take a break for a minute, but we're hoping to publish those results. We'll probably go for the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine or one of those ones, and hopefully we can get a publication out of it. It's pretty much written. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and so I want to read it 3,000 times before I submit it, and we're maybe around the 2,000 read at the moment.
Oh my God. Well, you know what they say, done is more profitable than perfect.
That is very true. I need to follow that advice. That would be perfect for me, because I don't even want to tell you, AJ, how many publications pending I have, because I won't submit any of them because they're not perfect. So I need to do that. I need to take your advice.
I would never have had a book out if I waited for it to be perfect.
That's a good point. I do love your book, by the way.
Thank you. So I'm curious, how are you involved with Doctors for Nutrition, especially because you do live in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of got involved with them when I lived in Australia, and then their first conference, they invited me to speak, actually similar-ish talk to what I gave today, kind of just my experiences at Loma Linda and what I was doing in the United States, what lifestyle medicine looked like in the United States. So that was kind of my first real involvement with them. And then they had some kind of interviews and press following that I was involved in. And then I stayed on as an international advisor. And so what that has, it's very, very varied. And it's basically anything I can help with. And so a lot of things don't matter that I live in the US, because it's actually given me a more confident position to comment on things. So one of the things I've been involved with is quite a bit of press in Australia. So one of them was in New Zealand, actually talking to some of the dietitians about bringing plant-based foods into the hospitals. And so because when I was at Loma Linda, they have both, the entire hospital is vegetarian, but then they also have a vegan menu. And so I kind of talked about my experience with that and how it's, more than nutritionally adequate for sick patients, and why that's the case, why it helps healing, and why it's a good time to introduce it and things like that. And so a lot of commenting on popular press articles, writing for, they have a magazine they're affiliated with, I think it's Nourish or Nourish Life, something along those lines. We published through there. So I put in my cancer article there, which was really nice. It was cool because they gave me a free magazine, but I didn't want to post it internationally. So I just posted it to my dad, and he was like, hey, I just got a magazine and it has you in it. And I put a photo of me and my dad in the article, and he was very surprised. So super nice with that. And then, yeah, I think just when things come up, anything that can be done from a distance, I just kind of try and help out with. There's one at the moment. There's a case for parenteral or things like nasogastric feeding, if it's appropriate to use plant-based options versus dairy-based substitutes. It's one of the things I'm working on at the moment. So yeah, it's pretty much as I can help out with.
If people, do you see patients virtually or in person? How can somebody work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm obviously affiliated with Nathan from Fasting Escape. So anything involving fasting that they need a doctor for, so pre-screening for fasting, if you're not sure if it's for you medically, if you're on medications that you need to come off, we can try and taper you off those to make it safe for fasting. And then, if you're not looking for that, but you're looking for, maybe a plant-based doctor, a lifestyle-focused doctor, someone that I tend to take people, I like taking people off medications rather than putting them on. And so I do have telemedicine. I have both telemedicine, depending what state you live in, and then wellness consultations that would be non-medical, but similar advice. I just can't do the actual prescribing or ordering labs or what would be considered practicing medicine. But I am working this year to get licensed in every state of the US, so then I can practice medicine with anyone that wants to. It's just a little expensive, so we're working on it.
How many states do you happen to know what states, or can I list what states you're available in right now at the time of this broadcast?
Sure. At the moment, I'm currently licensed in Tennessee, I'm licensed in California, and I'm licensed in Florida. And then the next, I don't know. I thought I had a list in front of me, but I don't. I have a list that will be kind of my next ones that I'll be getting. So I'm looking at getting about another 8 states within the next couple of months. And then, yeah, by the end of the year, I'd love to be in every state. There are a couple of states. So I know Alabama is one, I think maybe Kansas, where as long as I only see 10 people per year, you don't need a separate license. So there's a couple. So I would just say, if you're interested, just reach out to me and I can kind of talk to you about what we can and can't do and go from there. I'd absolutely love to see anyone interested.
That's fantastic. The guide that you contributed to, Eating Healthy for Less Than $4 a Day, is that something we can see? Because that to me is very important.
Absolutely. So the one with American College of Lifestyle Medicine is a member resource. So if anyone's a member with ACLM, they can download it for free on the website. And then the one with WIC, I actually just put it up on my own website. So you can just search like my name and WIC, or I can go ahead and give you the link for that. And that one's freely available on my website.
Wow, that's great. Well, guys, it sounds like you have your fingers in a lot of pies.
I always say I get bored really easily, but honestly, I'm just really passionate. I love what I do, and I find it really hard to say no when something sounds cool. So I just tend to end up doing a lot of things. So yeah, that's how I'm a little, it seems like I do a lot. I don't feel like I do, but then when I see it on paper, I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of a lot, but it just makes me happy. I mean, you stream every day, like you have to love what you do.
Going for the world's record. Yeah.
Exactly. But I mean, when you love what you do, it doesn't really feel like work, right?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the work you do in general with plant-based nutrition, now with the Fasting Escape, and also with Doctors for Nutrition in Australia.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when we have another fabulous doctor as part of the Plant-Based Experts Down Under Week. Also a member of Doctors for Nutrition, Dr. Luke Wilson. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.